What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Tightlines podcast hosted by me, Tyler Plackey. This week's episode is a fun idea where I'm going to be using ChatGPT to give me a list of 10 words that have some sort of relation to bass fishing. And I'm going to take those words and I'm going to try and elaborate on each as best as possible. This should be a really fun episode. I'm going to see what kind of comes off the top of my head as this starts and just kind of see where we get. So sit up, strap in, and get ready for this hopefully very fun episode of the Tightlines podcast. All right, so before we get too far into this, I want to apologize real quick about my voice. I am currently sick. My throat is not feeling very well, but the show must go on, so we're going to be recording this episode for you guys. So I will try and edit out coughing as much as possible. Also, any sort of sound from a cough drop or anything like that, just because my throat's honestly killing me. But I want to get this episode out for you guys. This ought to be a ton of fun. So, like I said, I have 10 words here from ChatGPT. I have no notes written on them. I just have the 10 words written down. And we're going to go through them one at a time. And I'm just going to kind of talk about them. And they're all in some sort of relation to bass fishing. So, the first word is going to be spinnerbait. So, when I think of spinnerbait, I think of fall fishing. I think of Colorado blades. I think of whatever the other type of blade is. I can't think of it right now. Willow blades. That's what it is. It's a willow blade. I think of big presentations. I think of huge fish. I think of a ton of fun in the fall. Spinner baits are just an absolute killer bait to throw in the fall. I like them, especially when it's kind of windy. I like to go over on like the windblown side where kind of the waves are, where it's not as calm, especially if you're on like a pond or a lake. Or find the side where the wind's blowing into and everything's getting stirred up, and just go throw a spinnerbait and just have a ton of fun catching fish. Trailer, don't have to have a trailer for me. Sometimes I'll throw a trailer on, sometimes I'll throw on a stinger hook to it. But I just love a good spinnerbait. They're a ton of fun to throw, and honestly, I don't know if there's a better bait for someone just to learn how to catch a bass on anyways. So that is the first word, that is spinnerbait. All right, you guys, our second word today is going to be kayak. So when I think of kayak, I think about the fact that I've been looking to buy a kayak to go fishing in. I think about small water. I think about big water. I think about really any water. I think about how it's kind of like a boat, but smaller, a lot more cost effective than a bass boat would be. A little more of a simplistic setup, but also extremely customizable. Kayaks are a ton of fun. I fished out of a kayak once in my life, and I had a blast with it. It was hard. It was definitely different than bank fishing or fishing off a boat. And so it's definitely something that you have to adapt to and learn from. But it can be very rewarding. It's one of those where you can throw it in the water in the morning and knock it out until the evening if you got a good kayak and you have the will to fish. Kayaks, like I said, ton of fun. They can be super cheap. I mean, you can be getting cheap $200 Pelicans. You can be getting, $6,000 Hobies, or anywhere in between. You can get brand name, off-brand, 10-foot, 14-foot, stand-up, sit-in. There's just a bajillion different kayaks out there and types of kayaks you can get. You can get a motor-driven. You can get a pedal drive. You can get a paddle kayak. You can get kind of like a skiff kayak where it's almost like a paddleboard that you're sitting on, where it's not as, there's not any sort of buildup around the side. You can put electronics on it. You can have forward facing sonar. You can have down imaging, side imaging. You can have, lights. You can have music. You can take one ride. You can take 20 rides. So that's what I think about with kayaks, is that there's just a ton of options out there, but it really opens you up to the world of fishing more than just standing on a bank and throwing at a pond or a river. So that's what I think about when I think kayak. The third word that we have today is going to be crankbait. And when I think about a crankbait, I think about, for me, the spring. I think about colder water. I'm thinking about a square bill. I'm thinking about throwing it, if you got 3-foot water, throwing a 4-foot diver, a square bill diver that's going down, bumping off rocks. I'm thinking about, catching fish, being freezing cold while doing it. Treble hooks everywhere and pulling grass off it constantly. That's what I think about when I think crankbaits. Sometimes, you've got a lipless crankbait or a traditional. I'm not a deep diver crankbait guy because I don't fish deep enough water for that. I don't fish offshore. As I told you guys, I'm a bank fisherman through and through. I fished off a boat a couple times. I fished off a kayak once. So Deep divers have never really applied to me. So like I said, when I think of crankbaits, I typically think of like a lipless or a square bill. I do throw traditional crankbaits, just not very often because I have a lot of grass around me, and all I do is pull grass off it. I think about red in the spring, and just, ripping these liplesses through the grass, and hopefully not hanging up on too much. Slowing these square bills down and bouncing them off rocks. I also think about, a moderate action rod, right? We're sitting here thinking about a moderate action rod, so you're not ripping the trebles out of the fish's mouth. A slower reel using about, 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon. It is light of a fluorocarbon line as you can get away with. Allows it to dive to the best depth that it can. So that's what I think about when I think crankbait. Moving on to the word action. We actually just talked about action when we said a moderate action rod for a crankbait. So an action is I almost want to say the stiffness of a rod, but not quite. So action refers to the tip of the rod and where it bends. So it goes all the way from extra fast to, I guess, like a moderate, slow, or maybe even a slow. I've never really seen a slow bass rod. The slowest I've seen is like a moderate. So an extra fast rod is going to bend way, 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 way up at the tip, at the furthest eyelet. And then all the way down, moving to fast, it's going to be a little bit further away, to a moderate fast, to a moderate slow, and a slow, all the way down the rod. And each action is for something different. So if you're throwing a frog, right, you want as fast of a rod as you can get. You want an absolute freaking broomstick. You want to set the hook, and you are trying to pull that fish out of the water. If you're throwing a spinnerbait or a crankbait, as we just talked about, you want more of a moderate action. Same with for me, a chatterbait if I can. I don't mind them on a fast rod, but a moderate rod, so you're not ripping hooks out of mouths. It doesn't really affect sensitivity a ton, honestly. Most bass rods are going to be fast rods. 99% of techniques that I throw on a 7-foot to 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod. That'll kind of cover everything as we've talked about. I know you guys heard me talk about my 3 rods. They're the only 3 rods that you need. And so that is where, and they're all a fast action. When you start going into a little bit more specific stuff for other things, if you're looking at, like I said, jerk baits, crankbaits, that's where you can get like a moderate action rod, because you want that parabolic bend where the rod's actually going to have some nice arc to it, and so it helps to keep that fish pinned. So like I said, when I think of action, I think about how the rod bends under pressure, and how to find the right action for each technique, and how to understand action. So I guess, and real quick on that, so when you go to a fishing store and you see the guy sitting there jiggling a rod around, he pushes the tip of it on the ground. When he's jiggling it around, honestly, I don't quite know what they're doing. I think that's just someone being a little funky. But when pushing the tip on the ground, that's kind of how they're looking at the action of the rod, because obviously every brand is going to be different. So, one may be a fast where it's actually a moderate fast or an extra fast. And so they're just looking to see how stiff of a tip that fishing rod has. So that is action. Word number 5 today is going to be tackle. And no, not football. We're not hip drop tackling out here and getting a flag. We're talking about tackle. And for me, when I think tackle, I don't think lures. I know some people think lures. For me, when I think tackle, I think about hooks and weights and barrel swivels and line and snaps and all the different O-rings and things that are not your rod and your reel, but also aren't the lure. So tackle, I'm more thinking like the terminal tackle setup. That's how I think of tackle. And when I think of lures, I think of a fishing lure, right? A worm, a spinnerbait, a swim jig, whatever it might be. That I don't think of those as tackle personally, and some people might, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But for me, when I think of tackle, I think of people talking about the difference between a lead and a tungsten weight, and how you always hear that once you switch to a tungsten weight, you'll never want to go back, and how great tungsten weights are. I've yet to make the switch because I don't throw a lot of weighted Texas rigs. I throw most of mine weightless. And if I do weight them, I think we've talked about it, the weighted EWG hook. So that's kind of how I think about tackle. Again, split shot worm weights, drop shot rigs. That is all. That's where I go with tackle, not the lure side. All right, moving on to our sixth topic now. We're going to be talking about braid. And braided line for me, I think about heavy fishing. I have tried the 10-pound braid on a spinning rod, and I will tell you what I have noticed. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I tried to hop on the train, and it just caused me problems. It's not what I was hoping it to be. I feel like I don't get to play the fish as much as I want to. I like a 10-pound mono on there. I understand I'm going to break off more, but the breaking off then at that point is because of me and what I'm doing, and rather than missing hook sets and having the ability to snap the rod tip because of way too heavy a braid. I noticed a lot of knots were busting. I tie a pretty good knot. I really like to think that. I don't have the issues, with heavier line with knots popping. So I think I didn't like the light braid. I like braid for frogging. I like it for any topwater, actually. I don't throw topwater on any sort of mono or fluorocarbon or copolymer. I throw topwater for spooks. I throw it for whopper ploppers. I throw it for frogs, for buzz baits, for, like I said, literally every type of topwater poppers. I throw braid. I think about braid for catfishing. Obviously, we're talking about bass fishing here, but catfishing braid's good. I think about the double uni knot, which I just learned a couple weeks ago, and how to tie a leader to braid. I think about comparing these different strands of braid, whether it's a 4-strand braid or an 8-strand braid, or whatever it is, and if it really makes a true difference or not. But yeah, that's where I think about braid. I think about real heavy cover for punching, and again for frogging, going back and just absolutely horsing fish, not giving the fish any chance to play. So that's what I think about when I think of braid and braided line. I think about the reasons why I would use braid over a mono or a fluoro. If I want my line to have no give whatsoever, I'm going to go braid. If I want to fish around wood, I'm going to not throw braid because braid is extremely, has a tendency to be abraded compared to a fluorocarbon or a monofilament. And so it struggles around docks and trees and stuff like that. So that's what I think about with braid. Moving on to number 7, number 7, the word is going to be bait caster. I'll repeat that, bait caster. So when I think about a bait caster, the first word that comes to my mind is bird nesting, and the absolute just monstrosity it is to learn how to throw a bait caster, especially if you've had no one to teach you and you are trying to do it all on your own. Y'all, it is so darn hard. I can remember, it's been about 2 years now since I bought my first bait caster, and I actually, funny enough, sold it today. I bought a 7-foot medium heavy fast Abu Garcia Vengeance combo for $49.99 at Academy Sports and Outdoors. And I went home and I put 17-pound monofilament on it and tied on a lure and said, I'm good at fishing. I'm going to go out and throw this and never have a struggle. And I grab my tackle box and I walk out to the pond and I click that thumb bar and I cast my lure, not knowing what I'm doing. Wouldn't you frickin' know it? I bird nested everywhere. I mean, guys, it was brutal. And so I sat my butt down on the ground on that bank and picked it out for 20 frickin' minutes. And I got it picked out, got reeled back up and said, okay, that was just a first try. Let's try and do it a little different. Because I kind of threw it straight into the water because I didn't know how to fish it. I kind of just chucked it straight down. It just hit the water. So, okay, I'm going to let go over a little bit earlier. And so I rear back and cast it out. And it goes about 20 foot and hits the water. And that sounds supposed to be me hitting the water. And bird's nest again, wouldn't you know it. I sit down for another freaking 15 or 20 minutes and cannot figure it out. And this goes on for probably 2 hours for me that day. and I get like 6 or 8 casts in 2 hours, and I'm just so frustrated. I literally remember walking inside and talking to my now fiance and telling her that I'm taking it back and buying a spinning rod because I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. And why would anyone ever want one of these? They don't make sense. They're ridiculous. And she talked me out of it. And I remember, because I remember that the last cast it bird nested so bad I could not figure out how to pick it out. I remember going inside with, I think I just had a pocket knife and just cutting and cutting until I just cut the whole knot out. And there's 15 yards probably a line left. So I pulled the line off and retied it. And at that point I decided, okay, I'm going to actually learn how to set this up. So I went onto YouTube and typed in, how to set up my bait caster. And that's when I learned about the tension knob. And I learned about the centripetal versus magnetic braking. And that I had magnetic braking, not centripetal braking, which was nice. I learned about how to set your drag. I learned about thumbing it. I learned how to hold it properly. And I literally remember I lived on the second floor of this apartment complex. I went on my deck and I tied like a 1/2 ounce egg sinker onto the end of my line. I remember I literally sat there and I did the thing where they told you tighten everything down, hit your button, and then start loosening your tension knob until your weight starts to move. And I got it to move. And then I got to move a little bit more. And then I got to move a little bit more. And then I literally sat there and just like pitched, or like just kind of like underhand flicked, standing on my deck on the second floor, and just kind of pitched this weight around onto the ground, hoping I didn't hit a car out in the parking lot. And I remember getting so excited, but it was like, guys, this was like February. It was so early in the year, and it was so freezing cold. And I remember getting so excited because I was finally getting the weight to move without backlashing. And so the next morning I get up and I go out front. We have a yard out front of our building there. And I go out and I just start casting it. And I cast it like 10 foot and I get it to stop. I'm thumbing this thing hard, guys. It's not going anywhere. And I'm starting to learn the finesse of thumbing it and how to adjust the tension knob and how to adjust the brakes. And how to make all these changes to actually get a better cast. And I remember I probably spent 6 hours outside that day just freaking throwing a 1/2 ounce egg sinker around in the front yard. People can be like, what is wrong with this kid? And that's how I learned to throw a bait caster. And it was so much fun. I remember the sense of accomplishment I felt because I got done that day. And I had been doing that for like 6 hours. And I went inside and I found a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait that I had. And it was this red KVD spinnerbait from Strike King. And it has a stinger hook on it. I was kind of nudging on it earlier when I was talking about a stinger hook. And I don't have this lure anymore. I lost it at a pond about a year ago, and I'm really sad about it. But I remember I get this tied on. I go over to the pond that's kind of in front and to the left of our apartment. I walk down that hill that was the pond I was throwing at the day before. And I had this spinnerbait tied on. I throw it out, and it goes like 20 foot, but I didn't backlash. And I actually get to reel in a spinnerbait on my bait caster. And I sat there and threw that thing for 2 hours. I think I caught a fish that night too. I don't remember if I caught a fish that day or the next morning. But I do remember catching a fish, my first fish on that bait caster on a red Strike King KVD spinnerbait in the 1/2 ounce with the little stinger hook on the back. It was a great spinnerbait. I wish I had it. Lost it to a fish, but it was so much fun. And that's what I think about when I think about a bait caster, is elevating your fishing, getting to learn new techniques. Because from there, I had a push button, and after that push button, I bought a bait caster. I actually didn't buy a spinning rod next. I didn't have a spinning rod. I actually didn't have a true spinning rod for almost another year. I got really big into swim baits and into chatterbaits and spinner baits, and that's really all I threw. So that's what I think about the bait casters, just elevating your fishing, learning new techniques. I think about the struggles of learning how to throw a bait caster, but also the reward from working hard and figuring it out, because it is fun to throw. And maybe you do feel a little bit cooler throwing one of them instead of a push button, and that's okay. It's definitely a skill that is hard to master, and I still bird's nest now. I'm throwing one for 2 years. I've got a couple of them now, and I've got some nicer ones, and I really enjoy throwing them. But you're still going to backlash. It's still going to be a little bit of a struggle. So that's what I think about when I think about the word bait caster. All right, moving on. Our 8th word today is going to be presentation. And this one's an interesting one because when I think of presentation, I think of, this sounds like, well, duh, it's like, how are you showing off the lure to the fish to literally lure it? That's why it's called lure. You're trying to lure this fish. And so I think about things like, is it going to hit the bottom and have action? That's why the rage tail line was invented. With the flanges and having action when the craw hits the bottom or the worm hits the bottom, the little tail shakes. Is it going to present as long and skinny, short and fat, really big, really small? That's where you start getting, your trick worms is a long and skinny profile. Your Neds is kind of a shorter, stubbier. Big, long, 10-inch Mondo worms, 5-inch Senkos. You even can start going into stuff like, a swim bait. Is it going to be a long skinny? Is going to be short and stubby, especially with whopper ploppers. I mean, you look at the differences in whopper ploppers and how they present. I think about color. I think about shiny versus matte finish. I think about flake. But that's what I think about with presentation is how can I make adjustments and how can I make this look different to entice a fish to bite. So our ninth word here is going to be plopper. And I'm guessing that's going to mean a whopper plopper. And when I think about a whopper plopper, I think about big fish and big fun. Like we talked about in last week's episode, I just broke my PB on one, which was really cool. It's really fun. But, I mean, this sounds horrible to say, and I don't want anyone to take offense to this, but I feel like it's kind of a stupid-proof lure. If you can go out and buy a decent whopper plopper, you can go out and buy a Berkley Choppa or a River to Sea. The first thing, we're going to go back to presentation, is make sure that it's stubby in some way. It doesn't mean it has to be short. Make sure that it's kind of fat, right? We don't want it to be this real long skinny. We don't want it to look like a spook at all. I like fatter because the skinny ones roll and the fat ones don't. I had great luck with the Chaos Shad from Bass Pro. It didn't roll once with me. It was great. But I think about nighttime topwater. It's so much fun to throw one of those at night. You bomb cast it and you hear it plop, 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 plop all the way back. Then you hear the and this huge explosion and you feel a little bit of tension. You set your hook. I actually like throwing like the 75 size River to Sea whopper plopper on spinning gear. It's a little bit more fun. Plus, it's such a light lure. Sometimes it's hard to throw on like your frog setups with your heavy braid. Your big ones, obviously, I'm throwing on heavy gear, but it's so much fun. It's one of those that you can work fast, you can work slow, you can stop it. Because it's a floating lure, as a floating topwater, it's not like a buzzbait where a buzzbait will sink. Whopper ploppers float, so you can kill it. And I've had a lot of luck where you chug it along, give it a quick like a quick pull, and then kill it, and then give it a little pull and kill it, almost like you're walking a spook, but really slowly. I think about huge treble hooks that get stuck in my hand, that get stuck all up in a fish. It's funny, most fish I don't find actually swallow them. If you want to see my YouTube video, it actually came out today. I say today, the day I'm recording is September 1st. I have a video titled, I broke my PB again. I think it was something like that. But you can see I broke it on the whopper plopper and that fish like swallowed it. Typically I find that they are hit in like, it's stuck underneath in like what would be like deemed their chin and like almost like their neck, if you want to like kind of be anatomical here. And I don't really know the anatomy of a fish, but they because they swipe at it more than anything, they get hooked up on the trebles there. So that's what I think about when I think of a plopper. Alright, you guys, we have one final word today. This is number 10, and it is going to be the word worm. And for this, I'm actually going to go a little bit different. I'm not going to talk about plastic worms. I'm going to talk about a real, a night crawler, an earthworm. I'm talking about the living creature, and how much fun you can have with, 6-pound mono, a couple split shots, a bobber, a small hook, and a worm. And boy, guys, you want to talk about just fun fishing? You're going to catch bluegill, you're going to catch crappie with it. But man, you want to talk about some fun of just going out and just sitting on a bank with your grandpa, with a cooler between you guys, having a couple, sodas or waters or whatever, if you're old enough, an adult beverage, and keep having a 5-gallon bucket behind you and catching fish to take home for dinner. Because that's what I think about when I think of these worms. I think about growing up going to my uncle's pond in southeastern Indiana, and my grandfather and I would go back and we would fish, and we'd have the folding chairs that we'd borrow from the church, and we'd set up. We'd have 5-gallon bucket behind with some water, and we'd pull 15 or 20 bluegill out, and then we'd go home and fillet them and eat them. And I remember learning how to eat around pin bones and not finding a couple and biting into them and being like, ow, that hurts. I think about going out in the cornfield and digging for the worms instead. We didn't go buy them. We just went out and dug for them. And we had a little container with some dirt, and that's where we kept them. But that's what I think about when I think of a worm. It's just the fun that you can have with such a simple setup, and it's just so much fun, you guys. I don't. There's probably not many out there. I'm sure there's someone. But if you've never once fished with like a live earthworm for some reason, or fished with a night crawler, or whatever some of the other ones are, I don't know all the worms. But if you've never gone out and fished with a worm on a hook, like, most of us did as kids, please go do it. Because guys, it is so much fun. It's just such a simple little pleasure, and it's just a blast. So that's what I think about when I think of a worm. So, all right, everybody, that is this week's episode for you all. Like I said, we talked about 10 words. Those words were spinnerbait, kayak, crankbait, action, tackle, braid, baitcaster, presentation, plopper, and worm. So those are our 10 words. Talked a lot about each one, probably 2.5 or 3 minutes on each. I know baitcaster, I kind of rambled. Sorry. I know on some other ones I didn't really have much to say just because it's kind of hard. But I really hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thank you for sticking with me and my not feeling good. I really did want to get an episode out for you guys, and I'm glad we were able to. If you like the episode, please be sure to drop a positive review for us wherever you listen to podcasts. We are currently on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. So if you're listening to this, you're on one of those podcast platforms, you can drop us a like. You can subscribe or follow the show. If you have the ability to leave a review. Go ahead and drop a comment down below. Also, be sure to check out my Instagram and YouTube. Those are Tyler Plackey Fishing. If you're listening to this on YouTube, congratulations, you found it. There you can see what I've been up to. You can check out that video of me catching that big fish that we were just talking about. I actually did a video of me just going out fishing with an earthworm a couple months ago, so you can go watch that too. You can see my Instagram, see, what I've been up to, pictures. You can DM me suggestions for the show, questions for the tackle box, which I'm going to bring back in a couple episodes, or just chat with me about fishing or anything else in life. I love to talk. So thank you guys so much for listening every week and dedicating your time to the show. I try to keep these somewhat short. Hopefully, you enjoy listening to this on your drive to work, while you're sitting on lunch break, whatever it might be, whatever you're doing. I really hope you guys are enjoying the episode, and I really do enjoy putting it on for you. And I really do appreciate all of your support. Your support is what keeps it going. I love seeing the views, love seeing some comments, the likes, the follows, just, you guys enjoying the show. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, you guys, tight lines, y'all.